Welcome, Wendy. Thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond Barriers podcast. We are thrilled to have you here. We know that our guests are going to be interested in learning all about your journey and a little bit about your story and what you've learned along the way, and any lessons that you want to share as to, when you think about Wendy, when you first started off, and Wendy today. What got you into the role right now where you are, CEO, founder of WBS Equities?
It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Thanks so much for having me. And it's such a privilege to be able to share my story with your listeners and to listen to your other storytellers. That it continues to inspire me. So delighted to be with you.
Amazing.
God, my story I think so many of us, particularly I am a serial entrepreneur to my very core. I mean, I remember being at a very young age where most people think about being astronauts or the president of the United States. I wanted to be the president of a bank. I can't tell you where this came from or why, but that's, my early thinking was incredibly focused. And I really, as I look back and think about how I ended up where I am today, I didn't think about the journey. I only was focused on the end goal. And as I reflect back, I missed how important and interesting and fun the journey can be. So today I think so much more about the journey, and that the journey is my value, right? That the value is in the journey. So how I got here is, a strange set of circumstances, but I don't think I saw myself as a serial entrepreneur. I thought I would first job in life and my second job, and that would be it, because that was kind of, you go get some training somewhere and then you end up where you're supposed to be, or wherever that goal is, instead of learning about myself and thinking about enjoying the path and continuously growing and changing, right? I think so many of us fear change. But today I'm so happy and I feel so grateful with where I am. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called WBS Equities. We specialize in ground up construction, renovation, and sale leasebacks of food manufacturing and food distribution facilities. So I jokingly say that I hold up a sign on the side of the highway that says, "We'll do real estate for food." Way to understand that we do industrial real estate for food manufacturing companies. And the other side of my business life is I am on the board of directors of a publicly traded marijuana company, Green Thumb Industries. We're among the largest companies in the United States, with operations in 17 states, well over 4,000 employees, and close to $1 billion in revenues, which I sit here and kind of giggle that I am now. I always wanted to be on the board of a publicly traded company. I just think it would be in a federally illegal business. But I'm one of the very few women on the boards of publicly traded cannabis companies. We started growing in this business, and when we became a publicly traded company, I was the only woman. Outside director, and in the first year I was one of only 2 women.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, we're advancing, but still have a long way to go. So that's where I am today. A little bit about what
Phenomenal. I love that story. And I love, like you were saying, I love what I hear out of there. There was a level of curiosity, and, you didn't have that straight traditional kind of career path. And like you said, I think you embraced the idea of curiosity. And I think that hunger that you had too for some, for whether it was variety or you wanting to be kind of the president of your bank. And can you talk a little bit about the uncertainty? Like, how did you step into that uncertainty? Because I know a lot of the times for women, especially going into industries where there are few women or not a lot of role models like ourselves that we see. And then going into an industry where switching industries in some cases, like you worked for a corporation, then you've gone off on your own. How do you step into that certainty? Do you have fear and self-doubt? And when you do, how do you keep pushing forward?
Oh my God. I'm going to say I used to have fear and self-doubt.
Uh-huh.
And I think today I almost have no fears. But that came only through really deeply personal and painful experiences, which I don't spend a lot of time in the rear view mirror looking backwards. But I am very conscious, though, that until I began to let go of fears that were holding me back, I wasn't living a full life, and I wasn't doing all of the things that I want to do. And frankly, I didn't let myself dream of those things because of fear. And now I think a lot about big thinking. And I know it sounds strange to say thinking about big thinking, but a little bit like yoga, it takes practice. It takes retraining our minds to be courageous enough to let go of our fears and to let go of those things that hold us back. And one of the ways I started to think about it was to realize that I was defining myself by my past and by those expectations that I had. And it wasn't until I started to say that the things that happened to me previously did not have to define the person that I want to be and this person that I continue to strive to be. And I will tell you that it was two very personal experiences that I'll share a little bit about with you today that really helped me. And in the span of less than 4 years, my beloved brother was killed in a plane crash. And 3 years later, my husband of 24 years committed suicide.
Wow.
And I was broken. I was completely broken and shattered. And I had no idea. Well, first of all, after my brother was killed, I really didn't want to live. At some point, because of who I am and how I see the world, my sister and I in particular looked at each other and said, we are going to try to find a way to live joyful lives, live meaningful lives, and live purposeful lives. And as I started to crawl again, walk again, learn how to breathe again, I began to really realize that my fears were holding me back in every way. And it wasn't until I began to shed those fears, and there was a real pivotal moment for me. A few years ago, I was invited to attend a GE leadership training conference, and it was fascinating. It was at GE's old training center in Crotonville, New York, like Camp GE. And the leadership of GE decided to put on a conference, not for their top women in the organization, but their top rising women. So it was 80 women from around the world within GE. They're identified as the top rising women, and some business partners. And we were invited to spend 3 days at Crotonville. And the introduction to the program was given by then CEO Jeff Immelt. And so that sort of told me the importance they were placing on this was that Jeff Immelt and the CFO and a few of the other senior leaders came to this conference to speak to us. And Jeff Immelt could not have known that this was just 5 months short of the second tragedy in my life. And I was there and I was shaking and I was still really feeling very fragile. And it was still hard to kind of be in a crowd, and I was still trying to figure out life, frankly. And Jeff Immelt is walking around, and he comes right up to me in my face. And he looks at me and he says, "What would you do if you had no fear?" And in that moment, I looked at him without thinking and I said, "I don't have any."
Wow.
And it was as though at that moment, I actually believed it, because that is what had happened to me in those intervening months,
Mm-hmm.
without consciousness, but this desire to live. I had shed all of my fears, except for personal safety. We still, I
Mm-hmm.
think, as women,
Right. Uh-huh.
have to be very conscious of that. But those things that held me back by thinking that I was defined by the expectations, my own or others in the past,
Mm-hmm.
were gone.
Wow.
And that started me on this path of thinking about big thinking. And then I came up
Mm-hmm.
with this mantra that I've latched onto, which is that big thinking precedes great accomplishments.
Wow. Wow. I love that. And the idea around big thinking to me is it helps you, it's a level of self introspection, just reflection, and setting kind of this compelling vision. When I think about, you're thinking big thinking, can you tell me a little bit about like, what is this ritual that you do when you call it big thinking? How do you give yourself the space to do that?
So, because I'm a real estate developer at heart, uh,
Uh-huh.
I somehow, this notion in my mind came to me of a tool belt, right? I build things
Mm-hmm.
that make sense. So I thought about tools in my tool belt. And what I learned from coming back from grief was that, first of all, we don't get over grief, we learn how
Mm-hmm.
to carry it with us.
Right.
And what I learned was that when you are grieving, there isn't one go-to all of the time. That there
Mm-hmm.
were days that yoga worked, and there were days that not getting out of bed worked, and there were days that going out and
Mm.
consuming alcohol worked, and but that clearly no one thing worked all the time. So I came up with this
Mm-hmm.
idea of tools in my tool belt, different ideas to draw from that would help me give myself the space to think big. And it was things like knowing my own story, right? We all
Mm.
have different stories that we tell about ourselves. And whether we always believe everything about those stories, in different situations, we tell different stories. And I needed to be telling better, bolder, more courageous stories because I was courageous. And I
Mm.
started to look at the way I had been living my life in what I now called my old life, as opposed to my new life, was that I needed to tell the story of this strong woman who was resilient and
Mm.
courageous and
Yes.
curious. And so I thought about listening more, right? As I'm thinking about telling my own story, the key to telling my own story was really listening, asking questions. And when I was done asking questions, ask more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started asking questions and listening to people, I learned so many amazing things about people. People share their own stories with you, and you begin to find connections where you did not know those connections were. So,
Right.
listening was a big one, expressing gratitude to the people you work with, to your friends, to the cashier at the grocery store,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to ourselves, and to reiterate it, for me, it was reiterating the concept to myself that this courageousness and this curiosity had a foundation in gratitude, which may not
Mm-hmm.
seem obvious, but it felt that way to me. Practicing empathy was another tool in my tool belt, right? Things that
Mm.
made
Right.
me feel powerful and strong. Practicing empathy, first of all, empathy is contagious. It disarms people and it helps people become more expressive. So if we think about being successful in business, listening, right? If we want to be good
Mm-hmm.
negotiators, then be good leaders. Listening is so key to that, and practicing
Yes.
empathy, right? If you want to lead a team of people, I want to be an empathetic leader, right? I want to
Right.
be a leader that people want to work with and people want to say, I believe in her and I
Mm-hmm.
want to follow her and I want to accept her leadership and I want to grow and learn. Um, Other tools in my tool belt were things like saying yes. Super simple, but for so many of us, again, tied to
Right.
yes to new experiences, yes to challenging myself, yes to confronting the things that scare me, yes
Mm.
to pushing my own boundaries, and yes to standing up for myself.
Right.
And then
Powerful.
maybe most importantly, asking for help, right? I think
Oh,
so
yes.
many of us, I can tell you that for sure in my first job, which was at a bank, I worked at a middle market bank in Chicago. Basically, I was a widget lender, and
Mm-hmm.
I was one of very few women in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I really was bound and determined never to let anyone see any sign of.
Right. Yes.
So I went home and cried. That was one thing, but there was no chance that I was going to portray myself as anything but a strong and independent woman. And I thought I could do everything for myself and that I had to. And then after the two deaths of these important people in my life, I had no choice but to ask for help. I was
Mm.
literally broken. And that was a moment in which I thought, I don't have a choice. Like, it's not whether I want to be seen as strong, and independent. I have
Mm-hmm.
to ask for people for help.
Right. And that's extremely important. So one of the things that we really focus on in here at Beyond Barriers and with the individuals that we coach through our program is that idea of leveraging community and asking for help. Because I believe, research has indicated, and I personally believe that we don't leverage our community to the full extent, to the full potential that's there. Because, like you said, there are some ego, pride, fears that if you ask for help, then you're less than, or that you can't do it on your own, and those types of things. Can you talk a little bit about what helped you? Like you said, you got to a point where you knew you had to ask for help, but how did you ask for help? Like, what were, who did you leverage? How did you build those relationships? What gave you, what were the actual like words that you said, hey, I need help, in a way that didn't make you feel like you were less than?
The first few times I still did feel that I was less than.
Mm,
But as I realized that the way people responded when I did ask for help was actually positive. So I'll tell you one of the first things that I had to do after my husband died, and this was 3 weeks after he died, I had to make
mm,
a decision whether to go on a business trip. And I was going to hopefully close what was going to be one of the biggest deals of my career, to build
mm,
a very significant food processing plant for a really large company. And I decided to go.
mm-hmm,
And I am in a CEO's office, and I'm sitting in his office, and this is a large presence of a man,
uh-huh,
not physically intimidating, but an ultra successful, very polished, elegant, brilliant gentleman. And I'm with his CFO, his general counsel, and a couple of other members of their senior legal team.
mm-hmm,
And I'm sitting in this man's conference room in Irvine, California, spectacular view, looking over all of Southern California of Orange County, and trying to convince them that 3 weeks after a tragedy, they should award this giant project to me that was critical for the future of their company.
mm-hmm.
And he said to me, are you sure you can do this? Like, how can you? And he was very direct. can you assure to us that given what's just happened in your life, you're not going to fall apart? He didn't use those words, but that's
Right.
okay.
Right.
And I looked at him and I said to him, I can assure you that I will be 100% of the time when I am focused on this project, I will be focused, which didn't mean 100% of the time I'm going to be focused on it, but when I
Mm-hmm.
need, I will. And I said to him, I am going to add to my team of people specifically for this project. And he looked at me, he said, no, I'm asking you, I'm hiring you. And I
Mm-hmm.
back to him, I'm still a great leader. None of that has changed, right?
Mm.
You have brought me to this point because you believe in my vision and my leadership. But yes,
Right.
I'm going to supplement my team because I recognize that while I think I'm fine, I'm not fine, right? And it's going to take
Mm-hmm.
me time. And he looked at me and he said, thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
I got the project.
Wow. It's a radical candor is so powerful. Transparency is so powerful.
And they could see me shaking, right? I mean, this is 3 weeks
Yeah.
after, and I'm me, but I didn't really know what I was going to be able to do. But I did convince him that my leadership was what
Mm-hmm.
he was hiring for me for, not my 100% on the job every second, but my leadership and my ability to assemble a great team and to lead that team.
That's so powerful. And I think that authenticity that you brought to that conversation and that radical candor is extremely powerful. And, and what I also want to share and you can help answer that question was you did a little bit of self promotion in that piece where you didn't back down. You said, I am an absolutely great leader. And the reason that I've gotten this far and that you've brought me here is because of my leadership skills. And you kind of stood behind and spoke about your strengths and, that you are a great leader. And we see all the time and through research and through the women that we work with, they have a really hard time with self-promotion. This idea that you talk about your strengths or ask for the opportunity because you know that you can do it. They tend to opt out or they just don't like self-promoting. So they miss out on the opportunity. Can you talk a little bit about that what helped you get over and like speak with confidence and conviction that, what, I am a great leader. I am not completely okay right now, but I know that I'm a great leader and that I can lead this team, even if I'm not there 100%. When I'm focused, I'll be there. I'll supplement people because you knew that you were a great leader and you could lead a team. How did you get to that point where you self-promotion came almost naturally, where you built that muscle where it just came naturally?
Through a lot of hard work. But so I am an athlete, and I learned a long time ago. I'm a triathlete. I've done 38 triathlons. I've been doing
Wow.
my 22nd year of triathlons. And from athletics, we learn a lot about the connection between the mind and body and things like,
Mm,
let's say I'm out for a run and I'm just not feeling it. To stop and almost look at the parade that's going by in your head
mm-hmm,
and not stop, but just take notice of the parade that's going by and decide what you want to let keep going by you and what you want to hold on to. So
mm,
I mentor usually about 5 young women at any given time, and
mm-hmm,
youngish women. And a few weeks ago, one of them was really struggling. She's a courageous entrepreneur, but she's fighting a giant uphill battle. And I could hear in what she was talking to me while she was asking business questions. What I really heard was her lack of confidence. She just was feeling down about herself. And I said
mm-hmm.
to her, I said, Whitney, I want you tomorrow morning to go. When you get up in the morning, I want you to look at yourself in the bathroom mirror and I want you to say, I am a goddess on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to practice self-talk. And I don't care if when you go out into the world, whether you believe it or not, but I want you to project that confidence. You can go home tomorrow night and feel like a basket case, but not when you're out on the street, not when you are out running your business. You need to
Mm,
feel it. And just like with sports, if we can get our minds and bodies in the same place at the same time, even temporarily,
mhm,
you begin to retrain your mind and your body,
mm,
right? I'm a big believer in the mind-body connection. So it's the physical strength that helps feed our mental strength. So, one of the things
mm,
I encourage the women I mentor do is make sure you're exercising, right? If you want to talk about strong mind and you want to project those things, have the strength in your body, right? And without
mm.
getting, too off on a tangent and goofy about this, we know these things are true. We know
Yes.
that when we feel physically stronger, it helps our confidence and not losing that, right? And if everybody's incredibly busy, but 20 minutes, take that time. It's time for ourselves.
Mhm.
That can be very peaceful. It's time to think or not think, but it helps to strengthen our minds.
Mm. It's so powerful. I don't think people really understand the power of mindset, like you said, and the visualization, but the mindset, and as well as, I feel like, we have like parallel kind of like, thought processes around and beliefs around the, gaining courage and the, needing to deepen, reach into these alter egos sometimes that we set for ourselves, right? These power identities, these, like you said, a goddess on a pedestal. What does that make you feel, and evoke those like, those feelings of strength and emotion and confidence. And so it is extremely, extremely powerful. So interestingly enough, like sometimes we tell these to individuals and they don't understand how it would play out in the workplace or in a day or whatnot. Can you describe for us a typical day and how you ensure like, this, effective execution, but in those moments where maybe you run into a situation where you have to have a difficult conversation with someone, or maybe you have a big pitch or a presentation, but take us through a day of how you would prepare to get through that and maybe tap into some of these, power identities along the way to get you through there.
I know it sounds cliche, but it starts the day before, and certainly
Mm,
the night before with trying to go to sleep, right? None of this
mm-hmm,
happens without proper sleep. But my day for me must start with some kind of physical exercise, right? I
mm.
feel I'm an endorphin junkie, right? So what I feel from those endorphins help me to start to build that confidence that I need to face each day, because so many of us wake up every morning and think, okay, how am I going to face what's at me today, right? There are a million things, they all need my
Mm-hmm.
clarity. So many of us feel that our lives are out of balance. We're not doing all the things that we should be, right?
Right.
I'm behind on this. I'm not giving the proper attention to my kids, to my partner, to whatever it is. So starting the day with some endorphins helps our brain with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to decide each day whether it's just going to be a fast, kind of out of control, fast paced day, or
Mm-hmm.
whether I'm going to try to have it less fast paced, know that I'm not going to get to everything I want to get to. That a
Mm-hmm.
typical day for me is really spent on constant prioritization. And if I think about the
Mm.
things that I need to do a better job in my own life, it is
Right.
prioritization, so that I don't start the day right. This morning, I started the day at 7:30 when I was finished with my workout. I already felt behind. I already felt
Mm.
half the day was gone, that I was never going to accomplish all the things that I needed to do today. And that's not a way. If I'm that way at 7:30, doesn't set me up well for the day. But I am
Right.
constantly balancing between leading my real estate business, serving on the board of directors of Green Thumb. I serve on the boards of 3 non-for-profits.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to have a sense of priorities between these. So, in general, these days where some of us are in our office, not in our office, a hybrid,
Right.
uh, it's trying not to schedule back to back to back everything, right? So when I
Mm-hmm.
look at
Mm-hmm.
my calendar and between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m., I have continuous Zoom calls.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to then think that you're actually going to get anything done. Um,
Right.
but but the other side of that is I feel so grateful that I'm doing so many really interesting things that I'm so excited to do all of these different things. And now I'm
Mm-hmm.
just inserting myself. These days, I also spend an enormous amount of time trying to help women in the cannabis industry get funded.
Mm.
We thought with this new
Yes.
industry that there would be no old boys network, no glass or grass ceiling, and that women would naturally have some traits that would help them lead in this industry. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's an industry where empathy really matters, and often we're
Right.
less afraid to lead with empathy. I was dead wrong. It is
Mm.
an industry where all of the barriers exist, and I am not
Right.
criticizing any of the men. But the fact is, we're not on the golf courses often. We're certainly not in the locker room, and we don't
Right.
have the networks of people with capital. So really
Mm-hmm.
trying to connect women to capital and to try to do things that are very obviously female forward in a positive way. So one
Mm-hmm.
example, 2 years ago, I started an entity through which I make all my investments in the cannabis industry and
Mm-hmm.
outside. And it's called Woman Backing Women, because I
Mm.
want to be very clear on a cap table that that this is a woman. And so that other women see, oh, here's a courageous
Yes.
leader who's not afraid to do this. I want to either aspire or that helps to make me feel more comfortable. So I'm
Mm.
really focused on trying to make sure that at least some part of my day each day is focused on what am I doing to help other women succeed. Because again, it goes back for me to leading a meaningful life, a purposeful
Mm-hmm.
life, and a joyful life. So trying to connect these things. And literally, maybe the most important thing I do each day is to try to keep it from being frenetic and to try to keep myself from feeling like I'm failing on every dimension.
Mm.
That there
You
is,
are phenomenal. I think all the work that you're doing and the purpose, like you said, you really decided to embrace this idea of working with purpose and giving back, right? And I love this, you're leading with empathy in all aspects of your career, which I think is really important. And I heard you share that you, on any given point in time, you're mentoring women, five or so women at a time. Um, and I think that's really important in terms of, everybody always seeking out mentorship and, mentors and sponsors. But one of the things that I hear sometimes with, young women is that they aren't really leveraging the mentorship relationship. They may say, let's have coffee, let's have lunch or something of the sort. But what would you say are, one or two things that you would tell mentees to do to get the most out of a mentoring relationship? Like, I'm sure you coach or you take to task some of your mentees to say, okay, I'm not here just for like coffee and a just a little conversation. Really, how do you handle those relationships with your mentors, mentees, kind of the idea of reciprocity of like, you giving them advice and they taking it or not or whatnot?
among the first things that I tell women when I begin to build these relationships is that having multiple mentors and mentors with different roles, right? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
mentor relationship is one time, lunch one time or coffee one time. Some
Mm-hmm.
it's monthly, sometimes it's twice a year as needed. But I tell women to be very specific in their asks to their mentors. And it doesn't need to
Yes.
be on day one, but this is what I hope for from this relationship, because I think that expectation setting on both sides is really important. And it's important to know if the mentor is going to provide you with what you want, right? This notion of, oh, I've been paired with a mentor on its own,
Yes.
it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also tell women, this isn't just about this person is my mentor. Go join organizations where you can be in a room with 50 mentors, right? Where
Right.
the mentoring relationship isn't necessarily this one-on-one, but it's hearing people and meeting people, and whether they're in your industry or outside of your industry, go find venues where there are going to be women that you can listen to, meet, and have the opportunity to somehow bring them or what they have to say into your
Mm-hmm.
life. So it isn't just the one-on-one relationship, and that's where you meet mentors is. And it's whether it's a trade organization or a charitable organization or a women's networking group.
Mm-hmm.
There, go to an event where there are going to be 100 women and have 10 conversation. When you walk in the room, walk in alone, know why you're there,
Mm-hmm.
and go and meet people. Go walk up to them, shake their hands or bump elbows or fist bump, whatever we're doing this.
Yes.
And place yourself in the middle of interesting conversations, because
Mm.
mentoring isn't just this one-on-one relationship, but that's where those relationships begin, is in venues where people want to have interesting conversations and where they're open to it. So being very intentional when you are paired with a mentor, but on your way to finding the right mentors also.
Mm. I love that. And I love how you were saying being intentional, being strategic, and being specific on identifying what it is they can help you, help you with, right? What is the ask? What is the specificity of each relationship is going to bring something different. And I think that's important. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I could talk to you forever, but I know we're having to come to a close and want to respect your time. So we're to our traditional lightning round questions, which I love because I feel like this also shed some light on, some of the, some things that we may not get out of this conversation. So the first question I want to ask you is, what book has greatly influenced you?
Wow, so I sit on the board of directors of the Chicago Public Library Foundation. So asking me to pick one book is like asking my favorite child, even though I have, which one my favorite. I have no children.
Uh-huh.
That's such a tough one, but I think I would say there was a really pivotal book I read about triathlon that
Mm,
helped me really think about this concept of the journey and the values.
mm, mm-hmm.
And frankly, I don't even remember the title of it. But right now I'm also reading a Winston Churchill book, which
Mm,
it's called Churchill and the Jews, and it's just something outside of my realm, but something that in this moment in time when we think
yes.
about courageous leaders, Winston Churchill was a courageous leader.
Wow, that's fantastic. And you can share us the name of the other book, and we'll certainly add it to the link on our website with the episode. So that your
Okay.
triathlon book. So we can certainly do that. What is your favorite inspiring quote or saying?
So I have so many mantras,
Mm-hmm.
but again, today there is an Elie Wiesel quote that really resonates with me, and it is, "For the dead and the living, we must bear witness."
Yes, that is powerful, especially today.
Yeah.
What is one word or moniker you would use to describe yourself?
Curious.
Curious. Yes. And I think you've lived it. I think your experiences show that. I love it. What is one change, whether it was a habit, a behavior, action that you implemented that made your life better?
Um, I used to feed my soul with food.
Mm,
And once I realized that I was trying to feed my soul with something that actually wasn't feeding my soul, that was game changing for me physically and
mm,
mentally.
that's powerful. So this is my favorite question. And let's think about, and we'll switch it up for you a little bit. Okay. So let's say that you are, you're finishing a triathlon, your race, and you are 50 yards from the finish line. What is the power song that would be playing as you crossed that line?
That's actually a question that I have thought many times about because I do have a run playlist.
Uh-huh.
I do know one, two or three songs that I want to be towards the end of the race. And I've had races where, frankly, in the last 150 yards, I didn't think that I had the strength, mental strength more than physical strength
Uh-huh.
to go on. There's a song by a woman named Jonatha Brooke called Steady Pull. And,
Mm,
if I think about what has to happen in those last yards, it is a steady pull that
uh-huh.
has to happen. So that's probably at the top of my list right now. And then a funny
Fantastic.
old one by Little River Band. Now I'm really dating
Yeah.
myself called Cool Change. And
Cool
it
change.
really talks about changes in our lives and being okay with change, right? So many of us fear change, myself included, used to,
Yes. Uh-huh.
but it's a peaceful song about change.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to have to listen to Steady Pull now. I think that's one of those things where you're pulled towards the finish line. So that is fantastic. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for your time and for all of your stories and your vulnerability. That mostly, thank you so much for sharing that, because I know it'll resonate with a lot of individuals right now who have challenges and hear your story, and it gives them the inspiration to move forward. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to staying in contact.
Thank you very much. It was fun to be with you today.
Awesome.